Hello, welcome back to the IREX Studios channel. Today I wanted to do something a bit different to my usual content and do something that is close to my heart, which is photography. So today I'm going to show you the basics and how to get started into photography. So the first thing you're going to do, pick up your phone, launch the camera app, and on photo, you just press that button. Now, using your phone camera to take pictures does not make you a photographer, much like playing Call of Duty doesn't make you a soldier. However, with that being said, your phone camera is extremely powerful. And the technology has come a long way. There is a lot of software side processing, which I'm not going to go into today. Go away, fly. But the main problem is the sensor size. As a general rule of thumb, the larger the sensor in a camera, the better the image quality. For example, my Canon 5D Mark IV has what's called a full frame sensor, which is a 35mm film equivalent. And my old camera, the 80D, 80D, has an APS-C sensor, which is smaller. And my older Fujifilm HS50 EXR, which was a bridge camera, so one fixed lens, and had a 50 times zoom. It only had a half-inch sensor, so quite small. I think the maximum coverage was 30mm squared or something like that. So what camera should you pick if you're going to start getting into photography properly? It's largely based on use case. I use my camera for a lot of festivals and events, but I also do portraiture modeling and a lot of vehicle at the moment. There are three main types of camera I recommend to get started, which are bridge cameras, which are a fixed lens and they're not changeable, so the camera is just one unit. A digital single lens reflex, or a DSLR, which is what I have, which is a camera with a mirror and the lenses are interchangeable. And then you have mirrorless, which are reasonably new in the grand scheme of things. It's basically the same as DSLR, just without the mirror element. So then I'm going off script. Hooray. I do a lot of festival and event photography, as I said, so I wanted a reasonably high pixel count. In my case, I've got 30 megapixels. Now, considering that this has like 200 megapixels, again, it's down to the sensor size. So this is 200 megapixels across a tiny sensor. So the pixels are very small, not very good resolution. Whereas, because I'm using a full frame 30 megapixels, the quality, it's hard to explain. I don't know why the quality is just a lot better. But I also wanted a decent ISO threshold or ISO threshold. So ISO is basically, I will get into this a bit more towards the end of the video, but it's how much the signal, the electrical signal on the sensor is amplified. So the higher the ISO setting, the more electric running through it, I guess, and the brighter an image will appear. But again, I will get into that properly shortly. So I needed a higher ISO threshold with lower noise, lower visible noise, so that I can get darker venues in a better light. We're going to get into this. It's always been my goal to get a Canon 5D, and now I actually have one. I love it. Genuinely, it's fantastic. It's the best camera I've ever had. Had it for 6 years now, so I am looking to upgrade. I just need to save up over £3,000, which is a lot of money, and that'll be for the Canon R5, which is a mirrorless equivalent to the 5D. And I'll need to get myself a bracket converter so I can use all my existing glass being lenses, if you're not familiar with the terminology. Anyways, I'm going to grab my camera now, and we're going to talk about the basics such as shooting in RAW, ISO, shutter speed, aperture, and SD cards, and what to do to begin. So where do you start? So you need to get yourself a camera, get anything, get your bridge, get your phone, and even on your phone with more modern phones, you have the expert mode, which allows you to do what I'm going to be talking about today. And we're going to go outside. I'm going to sit here and talk you through it, but basically you're going to look at your light meter. There's a light meter on your camera. Let me see if I can load it up on here. Yeah. So it's this top bit here, and you can see that there is a it's very hard to do this. Let's try and move the microphone just a little bit. There we go. So you should be able to see that. There we are. Go on, focus. But there's a little like selector. What do you call it? Indicator. There we go. Which will show you how bright the image is. So that is just slightly over perfectly exposed. So if I take that picture, that's awful, but that's really well exposed. It's not too bright, it's not too dark. I look like I've got a lazy eye in that picture. If this is using an f1.8 aperture, 1/125th of a second shutter speed, and an ISO of 3200. Now, let's talk about ISO very quickly. No matter what image you take, there is going to be noise. It may just be less visible. Increasing your ISO makes that noise more visible. It doesn't introduce more noise, it just makes the noise that's there more visible. And that's why you've got tools in Lightroom, which we'll move on to in another episode, of noise, like artificial noise reduction, which is an extremely powerful tool. However, it can make your images look a bit painterly because it kind of takes spot values from around the noise and recolors them. So I tend to try and shoot as low as possible on my ISO. Whenever I'm doing festival and events, I stick to a maximum ISO of 6,400. This camera can go up to, I think it's 128,000 or 12,800, something like that. And I only use that in very rare cases, such as shooting in pitch black. Now, moving on with that, let's just quickly put up a graphic on the screen. So I want here, there we go. ISO 100 is darker than ISO 6400, for example. But ISO 100 is going to give you a better looking image, in my personal opinion. And you want to shoot that sort of ISO when you're outside in harsh sunlight. When you're in overcast sunlight, so it's still quite bright, you want to probably use ISO 400. And when you start getting later in the day is when you, I want to go that way, move up the ISO's camera split. You want to move up your ISO. The other two elements of this exposure triangle, as it's called, is shutter speed and your aperture. Now, on your lenses, if you're using DSLRs and mirrorless, you will notice this number here. It's layer ratio 1 to 1.8. That means that its minimum aperture is f1.8. The smaller an f number, the bigger the aperture is, and the aperture is the iris. So the bigger it is, the more light can come in. However, your depth of field is reduced. If you know a bit about physics and how light works, this will make sense to you. It kind of makes sense to me. I did do physics, but it's been a long time now. I'm 30. Yucky. So my other lenses, different apertures. And that's the maximum aperture. So they can actually do like f14, which is quite thin. So everything will be in focus. But if you want a nice bokeh, which again we'll go into in a later episode, then you want to use a lower f number. But you can increase your shutter speed to get the right exposure. It's just getting all of the three exposure elements right to get everything spot on. So, for example, this camera lens, my Sigma Art 35mm, when it focuses, is 1 to 1.4. So it's an f1.4 lens. My next best lens is my Canon L, which is a 16 to 35mm zoom lens. So this one does zoom in and does quite wide angle, which is absolutely lovely. However, you'll notice the minimum is f4. which isn't bad by any means. But if I want a nice wide angle in a darker setting, then I'm going to use my Sigma. Even though I can't do 16mm wide angle, I can do 35. And lastly, this is my cheapest lens besides the 50mm prime. This is my Tamron 70 to 300mm, which is definitely a zoom lens, telephoto as you call it. And we have the markings on here, here we go. So it has two minimum values because it is a zoom. It is f4 it's 70mm, and then it goes up to f5.6 when it's zoomed in. So as you've extended all the glass, less light is traveling through, or you lose more light, shall I say. So take those into consideration. It really depends on what sort of subject you are photographing. Pick a lens which suits your subject. If you're photographing football players or racing cars, I sound like a child, then you're going to want a nice zoom lens, but you want one which has a low f number. If you're shooting wildlife in the daytime, a zoom lens with a higher f number shouldn't be too bad. If you're shooting still subjects such as models or vehicles, then actually you can go for even higher f numbers and more premium lenses. We will talk about adding artificial light with a flash gun in another episode, and how to bounce light, etc. For now, we'll talk about shutter speed. Now, this one's really easy to get your head around, or at least I find it is. So, shutter speed is measured in seconds or fractions of a second. So, if you want to set your camera up on a tripod, go outside, point your camera to the stars, as long as it's a clear night, set the focus to infinity. So this is the only time I do use manual focus. I will load it up and I will use the viewfinder to make sure that the stars are very crisp. Therefore, I know that it's set at the right focal length. Then you can set your camera to a long shutter speed, so 30 seconds. And that is how long that gate or the shutter is open for, allowing light to hit that sensor for 30 seconds. If you're getting action, you'll want to shoot over 200th of a second, so it's like that. Slow-mo guys actually did a really good video on this, which I will link in the description below, and it gives you a bit more in depth of how a camera works. Once you've practiced with all of those things, you can start shooting manually, which is what I do. But as you can see on this dial, here, there we go, here, there are lots of letters. Once it focuses, I'll read them out to you. You have AV, TV, M, B. Those are your main ones. And you also have A, which is automatic. Don't use it. You'll get much better results if you decide the settings rather than the camera itself. Manual gives you full control over your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed. So you are playing with all of the settings itself. And I've got to the point now where I know where all my buttons are on the camera. I can do it quickly and efficiently, even more than one at a time. I am going to kill you. I am so sorry. You also have AV, which is your aperture priority. So this gives you, I don't use it, so I think it gives you it gives you the choice of what aperture to use. Aperture priority. So yeah, you select the aperture and then the camera will decide the ISO value and the shutter speed value. And then you have TV, which is your shutter speed priority, I believe. Time value mode, which is shutter priority. That's quite interesting. So this allows you to pick the shutter value, so 1/200th of a second, or for even faster things, 1/2000th of a second, or even a second, or 0.2 of a second. And it will decide the aperture and the ISO value for you. Now, if you took a picture of something moving really quick and you have a slow shutter speed, then you're going to have a lot of blurring. So if I was to take a picture of that fly, because it's moving quite quickly, it would actually just appear as a blurry line. Now, if I wanted to freeze his motion, or her, I'm making assumptions about gender, then I'm going to want to use a shutter speed of 1/2000th of a second, which is, that's it, I've got the snapshot. But it may be too dark. And that's where you'd introduce flash photography or some other kind of external lighting. Now, what I would love to do is, if you guys like this video and you are new here, please subscribe, please comment, please let me know if you'd love to know more and for me to go out and teach you a bit more about photography practically, rather than just talking about the theory. If you want me to show you more about editing, and if you want to know about flash photography and all the other bits, because there is so much to know, such as what's the right SD card to pick and where do I store it so I don't lose it for a couple of days panicking. Not that that's just happened to me. Again, I am a professional photographer, but I am not made of money. One thing I've always been told is always have a backup camera body. So that itself, without the lenses, so that if this fails, you're ready to go with the second camera. Always carry a backup SD card. Well, I have 3 SD cards. 2 of them are micro SD, and they're for my drone and my 360 camera. So this is all I use. How to import your footage into your computer? Well, I use a little SD card reader, which is USB 3, micro USB, and USB-C all in one. Absolutely fantastic. I swear by this thing. When I'm out and about, do I do mobile edits? Yes, I actually sync my camera to my phone and edit high quality JPEGs. So before I end this video, we're going to quickly talk about raw imaging. As a photographer, I do not shoot in JPEG at all. Absolutely hate it nowadays, and there's a very good reason. When I import those files into Lightroom, which is the digital version of a darkroom, funny that, there's a lot less information carried. Whereas in RAW, or in Canon's case, a .cr2 file, it's carrying all of the light information, color information, etc. So when I take that image into Lightroom, I can readjust the white balance. I can make my images pop. And editing is quite subjective. I have my own editing style, and you can give the same image to another photographer and get a different result. Like, the subject and everything will be the same, but the way it looks and feels will be slightly different. Throughout this video, I should have some examples of my photography as I'm going through things. But yeah, please let me know what you think of the video. Subscribe, comment, share. It'd be lovely to hit 500 subscribers at least. That'd be amazing, because I think that's one of my thresholds on YouTube. I'd love to start making money from this. I'm not a YouTuber. As you can tell, I am so awkward on camera, but I actually do like doing this, and photography is so close to my heart. I love teaching people and sharing my knowledge with you. So yeah, thank you for watching. Sorry it's a bit waffly, and have a nice day. See you in the next one, hopefully. Cheers. Goodbye.